we on?
Yeah.
Let's go. Welcome to another episode of the OoruLabs podcast from Bengaluru. Ever complain how bad our cities are, how bad your commute is? You'll get to hear from people who are working to solve these problems in their own way. This is your weekly soapbox for urban sustainability. I am Satya Sankaran, and our guest today is V. Ravichander. If you pay self-assessed property tax online in Bengaluru, you probably don't know today's guest designed it. Not the website, the scheme, the entire scheme of self-assessment and easy payments and things like that. If you used Volvo buses on Bengaluru roads, you probably don't know today's guest was responsible for it. No, he didn't design the buses, but he worked in the setting up and evangelizing of the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, also called JNURM, at the center in 2005, which funded these buses. If you have walked on the wide footpaths in the central business district called Tendershore Roads of Bengaluru, my guest today participated in getting the designs and playbook done. I know because he asked me for inputs almost a decade ago, and I even have the book right here, which is his copy, and he let me have it. And as a member of the Bengaluru Restructuring Committee, he has co-written a report that might change the face of Bengaluru as we know it. So let's ask him how this potentially game-changing report and its implications can impact the city. Welcome to the show, Ravi.
Thank you, Satya. Thank you for having me and those very kind words.
So let's just dig into the questions. Does Bengaluru need to split? Why and into how many pieces?
So actually, Satya, I feel, the narrative that this whole exercise is about splitting Bangalore is fundamentally flawed and wrong. And I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
So if you really look at it, I mean, we were called the BBMP Restructuring Committee, and we did come up with a suggestion of five multiple corporations. But I think if you look at an average Bangalorean's life, my guess, I'm talking for myself, more than 60% of my life is outside of BBMP remit. And let me give you some examples: water and sewerage, electricity, transport, law and order, traffic, then the areas that come out under parastatal like Bangalore Development Authority. And of late, with the creation of the solid waste management company, even garbage is becoming another parastatal outside the remit of BBMP per se. So to equate that BBMP is Bangalore is fundamentally flawed in terms of, in terms of the construct. The way I look at what we have done in the restructuring report, and we can get into details later, but at a high level, if you ask me what's the most important thing we are doing, actually is adding the Greater Bangalore Authority layer at the apex level. That really is our biggest reform idea. I mean, there are other reform ideas. So, well before we get into splitting or multiple corporations for BBMP, the integration agency at the apex level is really the prime reform idea that we have in the report.
So obviously that also means there are going to be multiple entities that doesn't exist now to be created, right? What how does this play out generally in cities? What is this Greater Bengaluru idea,
Okay.
and why is there this aggregation or agglomeration concept? Or have you seen this in other cities? Is that where the ideas come from? What is that?
Of course, in this particular case, we were inspired by London and Sao Paulo, which is multiple corporation, as we looked around the world. But there are also examples of a single government, single corporation, which is New York.
Hmm.
The I think we have to step back a little bit. We have a constitutional defect at birth. When we set up the central government and the state government, we stopped short, for whatever reasons, of setting up the third tier of city government or local rural government and the like. We call them local bodies in the constitution originally. And they must have had good reasons to think down that line, though it's a pity. Because if you actually look at India before independence and before this constitution came, all the towering leaders, and I'll give you just 5 or 6 examples: Nehru, Rajaji, Rajendra Prasad, Subhash Chandra Bose, Sardar Patel, all of them were municipal level urban town leaders before they went to national politics. But we chose to devalue that third tier of local government from which these people came and refer to them as local bodies. and consequently they became vassals of the state government. Now, the 73rd for Panchayati Raj for rural India and the 74th for urban India were attempts to correct that original iniquity of not having the third tier. But the 74th in particular has failed spectacularly in doing whatever it intended to do. So consequently, we have a situation where we don't have a third tier of city government. We have a whole lot of parastatal agencies, the BWSSBs, the BESCOMs, the BMTCs, and the like, who are running riot in the city environment, who are not answerable to the citizens because they really don't form part of local government. So we now have to have a retrofit. An idealist would say, let's roll back all these agencies into BBMP and create the third tier of city government as it should be. The pragmatist will tell you this is not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the people who have to do it have to let go of their considerable powers over a city like Bangalore. So it's not going to happen, is the pragmatic view. And I belong to that view that while rolling into BBMP in principle is desirable, that ship sailed over 75 years ago. So in the context of our design of government, in my view, we have to do the best of a bad set of cards that we have been dealt with. And just one additional point, you mentioned new bodies. In
Hmm.
fact, outside of the Greater Bangalore Authority as a tier or a platform or whatever you want to call it, we are not setting up a single new body. All existing bodies come onto that platform.
So I want to come back to the parastatals and the coordination committee and things like that you have proposed. But broadly, let's introduce what is the proposal of GBA and the constituent municipal corporation you are thinking of.
At a high level, the idea has a mix of deep decentralization at the ward level and what I would call appropriate centralization, both at the corporation as well as more particularly the Apex Greater Bangalore Authority. So it has ideas both of decentralization and centralization. So essentially, there is this subsidiarity principle which says, let's do things at the level they are best done at. And you start with the lowest level. In fact, in our committee report, we did an activity mapping of all activities of municipal functions, and our list is over 700. And I know if you did an even more detailed exercise, it might be closer to 1500. So each of those activities, the principle really is if, do it at the lowest possible level you can do it at. Now, for example, something like garbage is ideally decentralized at the lowest possible level to handle it. And maybe you take the inert material to a landfill as a centralized activity, saying, okay, here's some inert material for which we need to find one place we can take it to, but not all the garbage. You decentralize and deal with it locally. In contrast, something like transport, which you understand very, very well, is by its very nature a regional activity. In fact, it goes even beyond Bangalore city. It goes into the regional area of the BMRDA if you really want to look at transport. So, something like transport is better visualized. It's difficult to think that you're going to do metro level planning, for instance, at the local ward level. That by its nature is regional. So once you realize what is done better at which level, that itself suggests where many activities should be done in terms of deciding what needs to be done, who is responsible, who plans, who holds the budgets, and finally, who is accountable if things go wrong. Now, broadly, this is the principle of what the report is based on. If I have to proceed to the three big ideas of the report, which are different from the way the world is today, let's start at the lowest level of the ward, where I talk about deep decentralization. The big idea that we have got at the ward level is to have a ward committee which exists today, which is fairly dysfunctional. We have suggested that it have 20 people, 10 which is representation from resident welfare, local slum groups, and the like. But the big idea we have got is that 10 seats in the ward committee we have actually kept for each 10% vote share in the corporator election gets you one seat in the ward committee. So I could be a losing person in the corporator election with 21% vote share. Two of my uh, nominees are part of the ward committee, though I did not become the corporator. More importantly, what we have suggested that at the time of the election, you file a minimum of 3 names that you have in mind for the ward committee. For every 10% vote share, one of them would get in. So when citizens go to vote for their corporator, they have a sense of the person standing for that post, and 3 people that he or she feels will be their representative in the ward committee. So you get a more holistic view of what kind of person this candidate has in mind for the ward committee. So this proportional representation at the ward committee level is the big idea. Coming to the corporation level, we are suggesting multiple corporations, but if there is this deep love that you believe the BBMP as it exists today, this unwieldy BBMP, you believe that it must exist for the next 100 years, be my guest, have it. I don't have a problem with it. If your decision is to have a single corporation, the bill that we have prepared, and we have a fully detailed bill that can be tabled, and it can be tabled as quickly as within a week with obviously the legal department and everyone looking at it. We have said n can be any number between 1 to 10. Ours is a very modular way. We say the number of wards can be any number of wards going up to 400 for the entire city. So the government gets to choose. The government gets to choose the footprints of the corporation, the number of wards and the like. But the big reform idea, whether it is one corporation or multiple corporation, is we are saying the most dysfunctional thing in the corporation today is the standing committee setup that we have got. Currently, we have about 10 standing committees. The average standing committee has between 10 to 12 people. So 120 people are accommodated there. Everybody is moving around with their own visiting cards of what they represent. And it is a cesspool that doesn't work. And if you cannot realize a dysfunctional thing that doesn't work and you want to stay with it, as I said, be my guest, live with it because you want it. So our big idea is actually to go in for a mayor and council. The
Mhm.
mayor would get elected by the corporators of one or many corporations for the respective corporations, and the mayor will set up a up to 11 member cabinet who will really run the place. So, consequently, you have a great degree of accountability because, for example, you will have a cabinet level corporator in the mayor and council who, let's say, will be in charge of ecology and environment. So, if you have a problem with the lakes, etc., which come under BBMP, you have somebody clearly accountable who, of course, reports to the mayor per se. So, we have very clearly spelt out that what you have in the, if it is good enough for running the Karnataka state, why can't we replicate the same thing in our corporation? Why should the corporation become an area where you have all these standing committees and everybody needs to be accommodated kind of philosophy? In fact, it is the executive role, and it is the role where we need to make sure that the place works. So we actually have suggested the mayor and council, done away with the standing committees. There are 2 committees. There is like an equivalent to a public accounts committee and subject matter, 4 subject matter committees, which has proportional representation of opposition as well as the ruling party, where they can advise, look at information, etc. But the executive role we have clearly defined. So it brings in a high degree of accountability. As far as the term is concerned, it's coterminous with the corporation. There's no more of these 1 year titular, worshipful, honorable mayor kind of stuff. So we are really now talking business in terms of we all demand accountability, but we shy away from embracing what's required to build in the requisite accountability. Moving to the Greater Bangalore Authority, now this is where everything gets integrated. It is the planning, it is the local planning authority for the city. All the parastatals are represented. It is a state government creation. This whole situation that we are in today is a state government creation. So I'm saying you have created the problem, now fix the problem. All the parastatals basically are your creation. Now make them work together for outcomes. Nothing about our city government is outcome focused. Everything is so many rupees crores in silos of government that work at cross purposes. So this body really is the body. And you got to realize that when you're looking at, even if we have a Bangalore City Development Minister, actually speaking, there are three ministries which are very deeply responsible for things in Bangalore, but which don't come under the Bangalore Development Minister. The Transport Minister, under whom BMTC comes, the Home Minister, under whom Law and Order, Traffic Police, and the like come, and the Energy Minister, under whom BESCOM comes. So, consequently, if you want the city to work, you actually need inter-ministry coordination
Coordination.
also for it to work. So, the Greater Bangalore Authority realizes this. The last step here, whatever we do, fundamentally has to be consistent with the intent and the spirit of the 74th Amendment, which finds expression through the Metropolitan Planning Committee as set out by them. Now, in our recommendation, we believe that that needs to be definitely there, but it needs to be there at the BMRDA level. The GBA is one of the local planning authorities. Today, you have a master plan done by the BDA that no parastatal bothers to even read. Technically, I mean, the BDA pleads for information, puts, no one cares to read. But when you make the Greater Bangalore Authority the local planning authority, which has all these people on the platform, there is no way they can walk away from what is planned, because this is a joint plan. They are all part of it as the local planning authority. And the reason to have the MPC at the BMRDA level is we believe that the future is in the city region. And the MPC, which by intent is supposed to be a multi corporation, multi government kind of setup, which includes rural as well as urban, by its very nature, actually needs to focus on making sure that the region works so that Bangalore can work. Today, if London works well, there is because there's a South England region, which is a kind of, you can think of it as a moat, which protects the idea of how London needs to work. Slightly longish answer, but I thought it was necessary to articulate.
I still remember the outcome thing you said once before, right? If you want the Belandur lake to be clean, it is not how many STPs you put, but how you can swim in it and not,
Exactly.
kind of. So, but while that is hard to enshrine in these documents, let's get back to the structure that you have put, and let's presume that there is a need, which you have already stated very clearly. There is a need to split Bengaluru into many reasons, even though you don't like the word split, and you're just basically saying we are aggregating more areas into Bengaluru. Let's call that, let's keep the premise of there is going to be a greater Bengaluru authority with its own mayor, following the London or the New York model, and having your recommendation in the report, if I assume, was between whatever, like you said, right, 3 and 5, 3 and 8, and 5 was a reasonable number you came up, and you had reasons of how it should be divided by population, by wards, and all of those things. Now, assuming there are going to be 5 city corporations, let's stick with that premise because it
Right.
seems like a reasoned number and it is a recommendation that has been made. And personally, I like the fact that we need to split the region of what we define as the new Bengaluru or the greater Bengaluru and administer them separately, right? It is a reasoned argument and there is a lot of weight behind what you are saying. So, assuming there are 5 corporations and you have called it Bengaluru North, Bengaluru Central, and things like that for whatever reasons. If you drew a parallel to the national capital region, for example, which is you have Delhi administered separately, you have Noida, which is actually a different state, and
Yeah.
Gurgaon in Haryana, which is also a different state, and a little bit of other things. They don't have the GBA equivalent, but NCR as a brand still does stand out.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't have some of the things you're envisioning. While I can understand personally, let me put that out there. Let's say we have 5 cities and not have a GBA. What are the drawbacks of that?
The drawback is what happened in Delhi. See, Delhi went for a three corporation setup that failed quite spectacularly, because the reason was that one corporation, South Delhi, was extremely rich, and the other two, the North and West Delhi, was relatively much poorer. They had nothing akin to the Greater Delhi Authority, which could integrate the various corporations and also address issues of inequity. Now, for example, in our Greater Bangalore Authority construct, staying with the five corporation idea, the property tax of each corporation is theirs by right. Nobody can lay a claim on that property tax.
Okay.
The State Finance Commission devolution to local corporations, let's say we have five, nobody can touch that. It will go to the five corporations as per the SFC formula. Similarly, if there's a centrally financed scheme that is meant to go to individual corporations, nobody can touch that. That will go directly.
Excellent.
Over and above all that,
Hmm.
there are grants that the state government makes from time to time, right now to a single corporation. Like, for example, you have the Nagaratna scheme of 7,000 odd crores. It varies from year to year depending on funds available. This discretionary money that the state government gives to the corporation will actually come to the GBA, only that remaining discretionary money. And that money will be used by the GBA to address inequities that exist in the needs of the corporation versus the funds available as own funds. So if you have the outer areas in Bangalore which have less infrastructure and need more infrastructure spending, the GBA would, through an independent finance body that they would have, which will give them the formula on how to decide where is the inequity between the five corporations and who needs a little more assistance and who is more on their feet. That is decided by this finance body's guidelines, and the GBA therefore gives differential money to the five corporations based on need and taking into consideration the need to equity balance on grounds of equity between the corporations. So the corporation has access to its own funds as well as this thing. And there's a thing I forgot to mention earlier. For instance, at the ward level, another empower, because we are talking finance, we have also suggested the increase in property tax in a particular ward. So if a particular ward got 10 crores last year as property tax owned, and next year they raise it up to and they get, let's say, 11 crores, we are saying 50% of the increase, which is 1 crore, can be spent by the ward committee for its local area. The idea is to incentivize the wards to ensure that more people come forward and pay the true property tax in the ward, so that the incremental money, they get to decide where it gets deployed within the ward. So that's another, I mean, there are a lot of smaller sub reform ideas. I just brought it because we were talking finance. So where it is different from five cities is the fact that even if you had five cities, the X number of parastatals don't disappear. You have to have a mechanism for that outcome. So, in our collective heads of the committee, there is no getting away from the idea of an equivalent to a Greater Bangalore Authority, because you need one conductor if you need to get music out of an orchestra. In the absence of that conductor, you get noise, you don't get music. So sans the GBA, you could do whatever you want to do, including staying with the current system. I have this expression that I mean, we are in a big mess if you haven't realized it. We need to do something dramatically different, transformative in what we are envisioning, and that's really where we are with this report. So the five corporations as standalone corporations will be far, far more disastrous than staying with one BBMP. I would rather we stay with one BBMP rather than go for five. Any attempt to do multiple corporations has to be backed by a GBA. In my view, you need the GBA even if you have a single BBMP. So you could consider an administrative decentralization into five zones, let's say, and say instead of five corporations, I go down the administrative route and I could do the five this thing. But then you are picking that as your preferred choice to stay with a single corporation. You would rather have the Mahadevpura corporator spend 3 hours getting to that meeting in the center of the city, another 3 hours to come back, rather than that person being in the local Mahadevpura area close to his or her constituents and servicing that area. You have a deep desire that that corporator must experience the travel to the city center and back on a regular basis for this one BBMP council meetings. You have to ask yourself, why are we doing this? And why are we having a setup where the city chief commissioner, in their tenure, I don't think there's a commissioner who has been able to go and survey more than 25% of their territory in their tenure. And that's how unwieldy and difficult it is.
Which brings me to the question. I want to take one more stab at the GBA, right? I know what you said is the G might as well have the GBA alone than not have the GBA and five corporations, but I want to break that thing and see one more time. You have corporations, you have mayors. What are we afraid of in having five city corporations? I understand the coordination argument. You have the Bengaluru Coordination Committee in your report, which says that GBA will bring all these people together and parastatals together. This brings to the question, parastatals are basically the service providers right now, correct? They provide, they also operate these services, they provide these services. The electricity is being built and supplied to the corporation, the water is being supplied to the corporation, the land transport planning is being, if they are service providers, why can't they be treated as a service provider rather than as a parastatal which needs to be funded? Why can't they earn the revenue from these corporations by providing that service and saying pay for these services, right? The whole point of channelizing the revenue from the top and the parastatals directly getting the grant is why they are unable to provide these services, because they are not answerable to the city corporation, right? I haven't seen that. Though the coordination committee is there, again, we have not fundamentally altered the structures of how these parastatals survive and the incentives for them, so they provide proper services. Be that as it may, in your vision, of course, you said you need to think something radical, but two of the people in your report are bureaucrats, and so that hangover will come. You are the person who is not. So I would like you to think radically, at least for this exercise, and say, really, if we had five city corporations procuring these services, what are everybody afraid of? I understand what you're saying is coordination. Let's say we fix this in another way. Can we do away with the GBA?
So, if you want to do away with the GBA, as I mentioned, I mean, for example, if you take Bombay, BEST, transport electricity, is with the corporation. Please
Mm.
get that. It's not with the corporation in Bangalore. That's the reality. Actually, the way we have envisaged in our report, and we talk about it in our report, we are in favor of a principal vendor relationship with the parastatal, where the principal is the corporation and what you call the service providers, they are the vendors providing services to the corporation or the individuals who reside in the corporation. So, what that means is the following. If I, as a city corporation, want, let's say, some sewerage line to be laid in, for example, because I just mentioned Mahadevpura earlier, let's say back again in that area, the BWSSB in its board cannot independently take a decision that I am going to deploy some of my funds to do something in the Yelahanka area because I, as the BWSSB board, feel that is what I ought to be doing. I just have to do what I'm instructed by my principal that this is the intent. Today, that is not happening. Today, the boards are, I mean, they are independent agents operating. Similarly, when you look at the corporations, BMTC is a corporation, BESCOM is a corporation. So these independent corporations, they are guided by their own articles of association. So you now have to make modifications to the articles of association, which we have suggested, where they recognize the supremacy. In our case, we have said they recognize the supremacy of the GBA to decide what happens in the city across the various corporations and the various entities. So the changes that we are seeking is tweaks to the government agencies like the BDA and BWSSB to recognize the supremacy of GBA in this territory, tweaks in the articles of association in the corporations, independent, the BMTCs and the BESCOM to recognize this. And that is how we are working towards things. Now, what you are suggesting, the same tweaks will have to happen for the five corporations independently. That the BWSSB is in a situation that there are five competing requirements in this principal agency relationship that exists, and now the BWSSB is in this quandary to decide what do I do now. I have these five requests that are coming, and what do I do as BWSSB, which happens to be the water and sewerage supplier to these five corporations. So It's just that at a principal level, it's fine. But when you get down to the nuances, it becomes a little problematic. And which is why we went down the route. And the inspiration was the Greater London Authority. Recently, somebody had actually gone to Ghana, and he was amazed that when they went for this meeting, the mayor was sitting with all these agencies that we are talking about. All of them don't necessarily report to the mayor, but they are all there on a single platform to answer whatever you had in respect of the city. My response again, I would have loved it if the founding fathers said there's a third tier of government, we would have had a directly elected mayor, we would have had a very different system. The problem really is we have a reality of the state government, of the MLAs and the like, and they have huge power over the city. The question is, what is the ramp for us to manage within this dysfunctional setup to get reasonably good outcomes in what is a seriously not working situation currently? That's really how I'm looking at it.
No, I think that was the answer to what I was going to ask, which is you have this Bengaluru development minister, you have the constitutionally recognized third tier of government called BBMP, and you need that. But the way to break, I thought, would be, at least from a theoretical level, if not, this could be a compromise that is required because none of those people are going to say that, oh, I can just make this into 5 cities. The name extra B in the BBMP was added, the Bruhat was added to the Bengaluru Mahanagara Palike to make it really big for political purposes and things like that. And we also leverage that, oh, Bengaluru is a big city, so it needs more financial allocation. There are benefits of going somewhere out and saying we are a big city.
So if you look at Bombay, for example,
Mm.
Thane is envisaged. It's
Yeah.
a separate municipal corporation. Navi Mumbai
Ev-
is a separate
yeah.
one. Kalyan is a
Yeah.
separate one.
Yes.
So in fact, in our case, what happened, we had the 7 CMCs and 1 TMC. We
Correct.
brought them under BBMP. Actually, at that point of time, there was an opportunity to visualize it as the equivalent of the Thana and the Navi Mumbai rather than doing the BBMP. But in 2007, 2008, a decision was to go down the BBMP route. So you make choices and choices have consequences. I mean, that's really where we are today.
No, but one of the ideas is to reverse those and try and make these things. And if you have this big mayor here and the smaller mayor, so let me come back to that. Is
Yeah.
this just an administrative devolution? All of these things.
No.
Is you do say that there are mayors at the municipal corporation level, so
Yes.
there is a political devolution.
At this point of time, if you read our KMC Act or the BBMP Act 2020, it is delightfully vague whether the commissioner is in charge or the mayor is in charge of the corporation. The commissioner is in actual charge, but it is delightfully vague. We are expressly calling it out, saying that the mayor and council is in charge and the commissioner works under the mayor and council. Though the commissioner is appointed by the state government, we are very, very clear in our language that the mayor and council is in charge. It's the first time from the time the KMC Act has come that there's an express call out. So, to your answer, each of the corporations that we have in mind, and including the one BBMP, in case you decide to stay with the one BBMP and our findings, we are saying the mayor and council is in charge. We are saying that the tenure of the mayor and council is coterminous with the tenure of the corporation. So we are not doing this 1 year stuff and 2.5 year stuff. If the whole thing dissolves in 3 years, so be it. If there is a change, I mean, in England, if Boris Johnson was guaranteed a 5 year term in the constitution, you would think he would have given over to Liz Truss and subsequently Rishi Sunak. It wouldn't have happened. So essentially, it's the same setup in the sense that the mayor could get changed. It could well happen. The party itself may decide. The corporators may decide we need somebody else. Let the system work that out. The devolution is very, very, very political in nature. Administrative is decentralization. So for us, the zonal setup within the corporation is an administrative decentralization. But the corporation is a political setup, without a doubt.
So between wards and zones in the corporation, aren't there too many? What's the zone again within the corporation, which is anyway going to be split?
See, the thing within the corporation, I mean, let's just take a hypothetical setup.
Sure.
Let's say we go with 400 wards, which we have suggested. So let's say each corporation has got 80 wards, and these wards in today's population, if you go the route we have suggested, would have a population of 30,000. The question really is 80 is too much to aggregate. So what you really do through a zone is, let's say you might have a 2 or 3 zone setup where about 25 wards come under the particular zone, because it just you are able to decentralize, because it's too much for all the 80 to come back to this one corporation. So in our head, after having studied a whole lot of these models, this administrative decentralization of zones, which just is an agglomeration of wards, the real political units are the ward committee, and of course, there's an area sabha under it also, which we have provided for. So, the ward committee is a serious political unit, and the corporation is a very serious political unit. The zone in between is an administrative layer which needs to make sure that the budgets, the devolution, the monthly ward committee reports, all that gets done. That really is what the purpose of the zone is. But the political units, if I can call it that, is the ward and the corporation.
We like naming things. Can Bengaluru North rename itself? Call it
No,
Yalanka Nadu, maybe.
illa, illa. In fact, in our report, when we did the five corporation, it was Bangalore Central, Bangalore North, South, West, and East. And I really believe it needs to be that, because I really believe there is a brand Bangalore. And any attempt to name these five corporations under five different names will be catastrophic. I mean, both politically, on the street. I really think this whole thing, as I see it, is still very, very much integral part of Bangalore. It is part of the brand Bangalore story. The story really is, if you want to strengthen brand Bangalore, Bengaluru in every respect needs to deliver. And therefore, consequently, staying with the multiple corporation with with a name like Bangalore, but breaking it geographically into region, is the way to go. It will be, if you're going to name it into five different corporations, my suggestion is just stay with one BBMP and struggle. I mean, it will be disastrous to even try to think of renaming at the corporation level, because it's really not a naming game. It is really about accountability, it is about execution efficiency, it's about citizen participation, voice being heard, having a proportionate share of property tax increases. Those are the kind of things that we have really envisaged in what we wish to do.
But did naming Thane as Thane really dilute brand Mumbai, really?
It is still Thane. No, see, I'm saying today, in today's situation, see, when Thane happened or when Navi Mumbai happened, the circumstances were very different. It was possible to do it then. Today, you try to take BMC and try to make it into 2 cities or 3 cities. Try it. It's impossible. That's so. I mean,
Fair
if you
enough.
look at the animal, which is the BMC, and try to say that I could do what I did with Thane and Navi Mumbai, you cannot. So that is really where I'm coming from.
So just one more thought on the situation regarding revenues and expenditure, right? So there is always a shortfall. There's always who gives money to whom is important, because power and money are the only two things. You talked about the
Correct.
power piece. Let's talk about how the monies come. You did mention that the state finance commissions can directly grant to the city corporation. So
Well,
if there are
that's
five,
the
they would
law. That's
directly
the law.
get. That's
Yes.
the law. So as long as it is a municipal corporation, it will get it. So the SFC cannot grant anything to the GBA really, right?
No, they
Because it will
cannot.
not be called. So it will not be called a municipal corporation legally.
It
It's
is a
not an
municipal
ULB.
authority. It is a municipal authority as authorities go, but it is not one that the SFC can devolve money to, because it doesn't have to the extent the BBMP or the city corporations will have the
So it is
people
not
and
an
they want.
urban local body in the truest sense, right?
In that sense, yes.
So then it cannot have the mayoral function in the way a true ULB constitutionally can have, right? I mean, so it might just be an administrative unit, which is like the Bengaluru Coordination Committee, which is another almost like a parastate. An authority is a parastatal in some way, right? I mean, it's like the BDA. Maybe because BDA and GBA are going to do the similar functions, it might just be another BDA, because you're also saying that commissioner is going to be the commissioner for this as well, right? In your
No,
report.
no, 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 it is not. We have a separate commissioner.
Okay.
The thing at the GBA level, we have suggested that there be a chief commissioner supporting the GBA.
Mm-hmm.
While the GBA may meet once a month or once in 2 months, frequency to be decided, the office of the GBA is a 365-day function. So
Mm-hmm.
on a day-to-day basis, I mean, whether so, for example, it is at the GBA, it will be decided
Mm.
that at a ward committee meeting, a single point of contact of each of the parastatals will be there in the ward committee, will be a directive from the GBA platform. So when you have a ward committee meeting, let's say in Shantinagar, so in that ward committee meeting, that the BESCOM person, the BWSSB person, the BMTC local rep, SPOC, if you can call it, the single point of contact, will be there, the traffic person, and they will be mandated by the GBA that what we have at the apex level has to be replicated at the local ward level, and they have to be there for the monthly meeting and give an action taken report in the subsequent meeting. So all this mechanism of, so your ward committee meeting will no longer deal with just your local ward issue from what comes under the corporation remit, but also what comes under the parastatal remit. So the way we have envisaged the ward committee, its remit goes beyond just what is stated as the BBMP or the corporation activities. So that's really what it is. We are not creating a new body. There will be no tendering at the GBA level. So the GBA will not do a tendering. So all works will be assigned. They may say, you BDA, please do this. I mean, there have been people, Ashwin Mahesh has always said BDA needs to become BIDA, Bangalore Implementation and Development Authority. So projects that cut across the city corporations, like for example, the major arterial roads or the stormwater drains, it could well be said, you BDA or you BWSSB, you take up this activity and make it happen. In my head, it is not a particularly bad idea to say the stormwater drain, the BWSSB make sure and that they don't use it, and it is mandated that not one piece of sewage can be in the stormwater drain as part of that particular thing, and now make it happen. Maybe they will pay more attention to make
Right.
sure that sewage goes to STPs rather than going to stormwater drains. So, I mean, I'm just giving that as a random example. But those decisions, so we are not creating a new executive arm with a tendering authority, none of that stuff. It just is to make sure it works. It is to plan and do as really envisaged under the 74th Amendment.
But I guess I will put links to the in the show notes to the report and its findings to BengaluruRestructuring.org as well, so people can read up more and get it. How did this journey start, Ravi? I mean, when did you start with this whole restructuring committee? How did
It
it come
started in
about?
2014
Hmm.
when we were set up back then, when the then Chief Minister, Mr. Siddaramaya, and the Bangalore Minister was Mr. KJ George. That's when we started. It always started as a three-member committee. Mr. B.S. Patil was our chairman. Mr. Siddhaya, former Chief Secretary. Mr. Siddhaya was former BDA Commissioner and BBMP Commissioner, was another member. And I was the third non-government person on the committee. And this report didn't come out of thin air. We met with over 1,000 people. We met with groups. We studied international models. We looked at a whole lot of things when we came out with the first report, which actually is of 2015 vintage, which has the five corporation and the structure thing. And that report is what still gets quoted. In fact, our latest bill that we have got right now is a significant improvement from the 2015. Though while you'll give links to that particular thing, our latest bill which we have got, which incorporates all our latest thinking, because we have also evolved. At that point of time, we were thinking in terms of directly elected mayor, but we now realize that the mayor and council is a better option than that. So our latest bill incorporates a whole lot of new thinking of the last 7, 8 years. And consequently, I mean, some changes are major, but many changes are minor, but it reflects, it's not the 2015 bill that we are bringing to that and which we have ready right now on the table, but something which is more current, which has been updated over the last 2, 3 weeks since we have been reborn in a sense, where the committee has got a new lease of life to apply their mind to these things. So that's something that I'd like to mention. But we also went beyond that and we came out with another 9 reports. And just to give you an example of some of the reports, they're all on our website. So, for example, we went into all the departments and we created what I would call a Bangalore Spatial Information Center with 104 layers of information on a common base map. So, whether it was the police or whether it was the water supply board, all the layers were brought onto a common base map because Bangalore needs, you can't have multiple maps as we have got today. So we did that exercise to say, here's how we could do a digital repository. It's not gone anywhere, but we've also got guidelines of what should be in the public domain as much as possible. How do you do interagency sharing of information on that platform? Who is responsible for updating it? We did that. We came up with an idea of and a report on municipalization, on how do we think of the outer areas which start taking urban characteristics. Can we intervene early and make sure that they go in a more orderly way rather than inheriting an overgrown village, which we are then trying to provide water and sewerage, as it happened with the 110 villages with BBMP, which we have not yet provided those amenities to date. So we did one on municipal. We did another one on scales of planning, in terms of how do you plan at the lowest level to plan at the regional level. We did another report on land acquisition. There's a lot of talk about PRR. Our view on how to do PRR is quite different from all the conversations that's happening in this space. As we don't want another strip development like what Outer Ring Road has turned out to be. We believe in an area based development where you take a larger catchment, but essentially people who lose or land in the process, the land that is remaining with them needs to be at least 2 to 3x the value of that land today. So you really need to craft an area based development, because their land will appreciate better if the area works better. If the area around PRR is going to work like the area around ORR, I am not sure what value you're creating in that area. So we did a whole report on how to think about it. I mean, I could go on. The rest of the reports are all there. So we spent the years between 2015 to 18 to actually put out a certain set of reports. We did some pilot studies to show that it was possible to collect twice the property tax that we collect today, that we are under collecting on property tax. We digitized the 16,000 census blocks. It was in analog form. So we basically, Bangalore, the BBMP area has 16,000 odd census blocks. So we digitized the whole thing so that tomorrow, if you want to build wards, of course, it's based on the 2011 census, but if you apply norms and heuristics about how different areas have grown, you technically can build scientifically better wards by using the digitized census block, because finally a ward has to be a combination of census blocks. So we did that exercise. So there's a whole lot of things that we did, which is carrying, I mean, which is basically catching digital dust, if I can call it that. So we were quite active in doing these things. We just believe that it's worthwhile putting all this out there. Maybe there will be a day when some of this will have its own uses. So this was the genesis and what we did during the 2014-18 period. Then we went dormant, and now we suddenly find that we have been again asked to apply our mind to what we had done earlier, which we have done in the last 3 weeks. And we are good to go with a bill that can be tabled should the government want to go down that route.
So obviously the government wants to go down some route, and that's why they're bringing you back. And coincidentally, the minister who commissioned this is also there. So it might be good tidings. But the question then comes is, you answered my question on the update. I was going to ask you that. Have you updated it since? Because the
Yes.
links I will be putting is still to the old ones, and people will still
Yes.
read only that. And if there are
Yes.
anything new, you can send it over to me and I can put it out in the show notes for people to read.
It's not yet in the public domain. The moment it's in the public domain, I'd be happy to share the updated bill, which
Fair
really
enough.
is the definitive document as it stands today.
Fair enough. But so the question is, we've been talking about the Bengaluru restructuring report so far,
Yeah.
and now we are mentioning a bill. What is this and why is it required?
So you see, we looked at the KMC Act, and subsequently we now currently have the BBMP 2020 Act, which I mean was passed but hardly implemented because we still haven't. So right now, of course, as things stand, there is supposed to be a corporation election in December. The courts have given 12 weeks for the delimitation exercise, which is underway. So that is on a separate track under the BBMP 2020 Act. We believed that this transformative kind of idea that we are suggesting requires an accompanying legislation bill which is brand new, built ground up, which looks at all the provisions of KMC, looks at all the provisions of BBMP 2020, make sure that all the elements are here, but in a manner that enables our three-tier structure to take root and function, rather than saying that in this section 20A para 1 be substituted with this. I mean, it will require about 700, 800 changes to make that. We said it makes more sense to have a brand new bill, and then we can compare vis-a-vis the earlier bills whether anything has been left out, what's been left out, and why it's left out, what's remains, and has that been tweaked, which we have tweaked some of them to be even better, and what's brand new. So we really felt it is best served by that. And this bill, we had assistance. So Sudhir Krishnaswamy, who's the vice chancellor now of NLS, he played a role in helping us draft the bill. Then Matthew Idikula, who was then with Azim Premji University, helped us. We had people who have formerly part of the BBMP and the government legal departments. We took their inputs in framing this bill. So the bill that we have put in place, which is reasonably good to be tabled, subject to obviously deep vetting by the government of the day, is something that has been drawn from the existing bills, the intent of our report, as well as inputs of these specialists, is really what we have got. So the process, should the government decide, is to table this bill and have a discussion on the bill, is really one route if you want to go down this particular route, and it's very, very modular. The bill is not prescriptive that you go for 3 or 5 corporations the way we have written it. N is a number you can choose between 1 and 10. Similarly, wards is a number that you choose. So everything is modular, where the government, through notification, decides that the interests of the city are best served by these choices.
I mean, of course, there are a lot of compromises to be made with the existing structure and the existing way in which the bureaucracy work, and it cannot be extremely radical. It's already radical enough in the fact that you're trying to restructure some of these things. But in an ideal world, given a chance, of course, we all come from getting better outcomes for ourselves, and we want to get more local administrative outcomes going. What would you want to see completely radically changed if this were to be your city in how it represents itself? I understand the eagerness to hold on to the Bengaluru brand, but given what it is, if this city were to be completely reimagined, what would you prefer you would have included in this report that you can't?
One, of course, ideally, I would have liked to have, the Back to the Future movie. I'd like to go back when the Constitution was being framed and keep whispering, saying, "Boss, third tier," at that stage, so that we wouldn't have to had to have this discussion today. I still believe that what one would like is a complete break and setting up the third tier. For that, you need extremely, visionary leadership at the state level, which says you really need to be able to let go, because the powers at the state government level are so high for the city. You need such an evolved leadership which just says that, look, the best way to do it is really to set up the third tier government, just like that you have the central government and the state, and go out the entire 9 yards and say, this is the way to do, and I'm willing to renounce all my power in this space. So if you really want, that's the report that needed to be written, saying that make the third tier happen. We have chosen the pragmatist route, realizing that there is an imperfect world, there are motivations at play, there are interests that have to be taken into account. So our report is not the idealist report. The idealist report is to say, set up. I would say the Kasturi Rangan committee had more of that idealism, but it never got into the specifics. It really said, give the power back to where it belongs. It is that report. It went nowhere, and of course, it didn't have an engine to enable. I would like to think that this report is a kind of engine to the Kasturi Rangan report, with some compromises, saying that it is difficult to do that complete devolution to the third tier, but some kind of a hybrid is possible. And over a period of time, it could potentially get into a situation where this GBA, initially it is a state government setup, but the way we have written even in our report, we have said over a 10-year time frame, the mayor could be directly selected by the people, and if the place is ready for that at that point of time, we would have a framework where that such a mayor could actually go and occupy that post, because it is not something that you could do overnight. So I see this as the ramp to a more local self government over a period of time. And if some of the reforms we have suggested at the ward committee level starts really taking root, it is more likely than not that we will get more powers of local self government in the years and decades to come.
That's a wonderful note to end on, but I just have to ask you this other question. We've always been uh, looking at this from society and government, and of course, when government procures these services, they are tied to these parastatules and a lot of monopolies. And if we had local government choosing service providers and being able to quickly deliver results and encourage more revenue generation through other revenue sources
Yes.
beyond property tax, because this
Yes.
usual suspects are what we already know,
Right.
the land and the property. Of course, the
Right.
sales is now gone to the GST and income to the center. What are these other sources? Let's say you want to do densification in a particular zone of the city, chooses to densify a little more than the others in a different
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
and get more far done, of course, with TOD benefits. Are there powers that we can give them in this that enable them to locally self determine how they engage with not just the citizen but with their businesses and commerce in their area?
It is possible, but it will require certain changes in the Town and Country Planning Act as we have
Mm,
it. So, the point that you make is a very good one. So, you could technically see a situation, let's say we have five corporations, and one corporation goes down the route of higher densification and TOD and social rental housing, and actually, let's say, embraces the idea of the 5 kilometer city or the 15-minute city, which we
mm,
all speak about. While another corporation will say that, look, I'll stay with business as usual, it's working for me.
mm,
So you could have situations of that side kind. In fact, one of the things in my head, I mean, it's a dream, but we could technically see some level of co-optation and friendly competition where different corporations
mm.
do things slightly differently to attract, and therefore there is this healthy competition which actually leads to better outcomes because each is looking at the other. Let's just take even a thing like garbage. One of the corporations can decide that I will actually set up garbage processing centers, decentralized in ways, and tell other corporations, you can send your waste to me for a fee, and I will make that a revenue source for my corporation, and I will set up state of art processing centers in my corporation. So some corporations can choose to become consciously saying, I'd rather pay for it and send it over somewhere else rather than deal with it myself. These are choices that will evolve as we go along. And this corporation sees this like it's happening today in the Scandinavian countries. If there's a way by which you can send your waste to the Scandinavian countries today, they will pay for it because they are short vis-a-vis the waste processing capacity of waste. And if you can get the waste across to them, they are actually paying to take waste away because they have capacity to process it. So I'm giving that as an example. You could also come up with different parking policies in different corporations. So a particular corporation could actually say, I will go for on street parking, and these will be the kind of thing because I want to dissuade in my neighborhood this kind of this thing. So you could suddenly have a whole lot of these kind of things emerging, and parking can again become another revenue or a non-revenue source depending on how you want to go about it. All that we have to ensure is a certain thing where you will need standardization, if I can call it that. You will have to have common principles of property taxation on capital value system, for example, within the self-assessment scheme, because at the end of the day, the corporation line will go in the middle of it. Let's say it goes in the middle of the road in front of me is where the line is drawn. I cannot have a situation where the house across the road has a different property tax basis from the house this side of the road. So that will have to have, if I can call it, common norms on how valuation is done for property. But outside of something like property tax, which will need to follow common principles, there is a lot of scope for tweaking. And you mentioned the TOD, it's a classic one. I mean, you could find a particular corporation which says, I am actually going to encourage the live and work centers, the 15-minute city, and actually drive all my policies in that manner. and you could find that particular corporation developing in a very, very different way in terms of thing. And the thoroughfare of people moving from one part of the city to another city will be obviously enabled, but in a manner that works for that corporation.
On that wonderful note, Ravi, thank you for coming on the show and explaining and demystifying this restructuring report and helping us understand what exactly is going. I'm far more excited about having more corporations and trying to break this. And of course, revolutions can't just be completely on a blank slate. It has to go through these compromises and take its own time. But I think we should have more conversations in the civil society around the last bit that we talked about is how can areas, ward committees, and all of the local areas look at financing themselves, managing themselves better, and putting forward ideas to their local representatives, regardless of what corporation comes or not, in moving the ball forward in better governance for ourselves. On that note, I'd like to ask everyone to like, subscribe, and share. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Satya, so much for thinking about me. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.